Unit 9, this is video 2 for our Civil Rights Unit. Access to rights, civic participation. It's a key part of today, and the role of leaders in that civic participation in achieving change during the Civil Rights era. The Civil Rights Movement, the goal is not to end racism. Racism is going to exist. There's going to be racist people. Hopefully we change their hearts and we change their minds. But that's a long process. The goal of the civil rights movement is to gain access and protection for your civil rights. We want equal protection for all rights. The goal is access to rights. The goal is equality. And this is by going through the government. Remember, the government created all these policies. The government was the problem. So we have to fix the government. We need the government to start protecting rights. We need the government to start guaranteeing access to rights and equal rights for everyone. And that's going to be through laws. The civil rights leaders realize, well, we're not going to go out there and change everyone's mind, but what we can do is change the minds of the government and make some change. We talked about Linda Brown as an example. We got the courts to integrate the schools. When Brown versus the board and segregation ended, you still had a lot of racist people. A perfect example was the Little Rock Nine, having to walk through just tons of racist people screaming and yelling and throwing stuff at them every day. You didn't change anyone's mind, but you changed the law. You changed the government. That's what you have to do. And through time, eventually, when we integrate and we live together, people will become more open-minded and racism will slowly but surely die. You're not going to kill racism tomorrow, but you can change the law tomorrow. Gandhi will perform or popularize civil disobedience, which is a refusal to obey certain laws, demands, or commands of the government that you feel like aren't fair. And it's often nonviolent. This approach of civil disobedience will be copied by Martin Luther King Jr. during the Civil Rights Movement to get laws to change. He will fight against bad laws to create fair, equal laws. And when I say fight, I mean nonviolently fight. He will not physically fight. He will not harm anyone. Through nonviolence, Gandhi achieve change. And through nonviolence, Martin Luther King Jr., he's not going to change everyone's mind. There's still going to be plenty of racists in America. But Martin Luther King Jr.'s role is to change the laws. First big example of changing the law is the Montgomery bus boycott under Rosa Parks. Where Rosa Parks is told to sit in the back of the bus, and she refuses, and that starts the whole Montgomery bus boycott after she's arrested. So the NAACP will pick Rosa Parks. Now, they have picked other people before to do this because you need to change the law. You need to stage a moment that puts together a movement. You need to stage a moment that starts a movement. And they had staged moments prior to Rosa Parks, and all of them had failed. But they got it right this time. The NAACP got Rosa Parks to sit on the bus. Rosa Parks refuses. She's arrested. And so they staged the moment to get the movement. And then a boycott starts. Martin Luther King Jr. will step in and organize the protest, organize the people, and cause the change. So they boycott the bus, which means they refuse to ride the bus. And after refuse, like, well, how's this going to work? All right, so when you boycott, you refuse to buy something. And boycotts are famous throughout American history. We can go to the boycotts during the American Revolution, where people were refusing to buy British goods or refusing to pay certain taxes. You put pressure on people economically. This is one of the best protest patterns. You want to civically participate and change. You want to force laws to be changed. Well, you can ask and you can demand. You can explain to people why they're racist, and you can explain to people why these don't work. But you really want to change somebody's mind, start taking money out of their pocket. That's what the boycotts during the American Revolution, and that's what the boycotts during the Montgomery boycott and during the Civil Rights Movement, that's what they're going to do. It's hard to change someone's mind. But when they start losing money and they start to suffer, then they become a little more open-minded about what you're saying. So the Montgomery bus boycott, here's how it works. African Americans refuse to ride the bus. They refuse to ride the bus. Like, oh, well, so what? Look, that's a big deal. It's 5 miles to work. You're going to walk? I'll walk. And if all of the African Americans in Montgomery refuse to ride the bus, it's kind of a big deal. That's a lot of money. So yeah, you're going to get money from your white participants, but these black men and women who are forced to ride at the back of the bus and be segregated, well, they're going to keep their money. And day after day, the bus company loses money and loses money. Day after day, this boycott starts to financially hurt the bus line. This is all organized by Martin Luther King Jr. It's not easy to do. It's a lot of work that goes in. You got to keep people doing it every single day, and they can't quit. You got to keep walking. You got to keep walking. You got to find a way to work. Yeah, but it's hard. I really got to get to work today. I'm late. You can't get on that bus. You can't cave. We do not ride the bus. We stick together, and we do this until there is change. It's not easy. You've got to persist. You got to fight and fight and fight. You got to carpool. You got to organize carpools. You got to plan. You got to think of backup plans. You need backups to backups. You've got to think all this through. You've got to organize this. You got to make sure that this thing is running, because if you cave, it's all over, and then segregation stays. Martin Luther King Jr. does a wonderful job in making sure for 400 days. It doesn't come easy, folks. If you think that, well, we'll just go protest tomorrow, and then after a couple weeks, the government's going to change the laws for us. It doesn't work that way. Well, we're going to go protest for a month then. We're going to protest every day for a month, and then the government's going to listen to you. It doesn't work that way. 400 days of walking 5 miles to work. 400 days of you, your friend, your neighbor, everyone carpooling, planning, walking to work. 400 days. It's not easy. If you really want change, then you have to be willing to invest. Often people aren't willing to invest. Often people aren't willing to make the sacrifice, even if it's the right thing to do, and the goal is virtuous. You need a strong leader to motivate you, to pull you through, to keep you together. And that's what Martin Luther King Jr. was. Interesting thing here is the bus line. We didn't want to segregate the bus line. It's stupid law. We wanted the government to change the law. The bus line didn't want to follow this policy. They didn't like it either. They were losing money. It's the government that creates the racist laws. The bus line didn't write the law. The bus line didn't create segregation. The bus line didn't come up with Jim Crow laws. The bus line had to follow it. So the bus line wanted this to be fixed as well. Government's often the problem. So Martin Luther King Jr.'s house is firebombed. They're attacked. It's not an easy 400 days, but they continue to fight. And I wish I had more time, but to give you an idea of what it is basically, I know they've attacked my house and tried to burn my house down. And I know they're beating us, and I know they're abusing us, and I know the racists are coming at us with violence, but we can't fight back. We have to do the right thing. Here's your big line. He who lives by the sword will perish by the sword. All right, I don't have time to read all that, unfortunately. So as they carpool, the bus line's losing money, and so the government makes it a law that, hey, carpools are illegal. What do you mean carpools are illegal? Well, you're doing that, and it's hurting us, so no more carpooling either. It's ridiculous. The government won't stop. Too busy. Come on. Government is the problem here, folks. Eventually, Martin Luther King Jr. gets arrested and jailed. $500 fine, served 360 days in jail. But eventually, this stuff starts to make the news. And people around the country are like, wait a second, these guys have been protesting for 400 days? They've been boycotting for 400 days? They're walking to work for 400 days? Wow, they're willing to make those sacrifices just to be treated equally? It's not like they're asking for anything. They're not asking for money. They're not asking for special treatment. The Black Americans in Montgomery just want to be treated equally. And they're willing to make huge sacrifices for it. They're willing to go to jail. The rest of the country sees this, and the country starts saying, yeah, we need to change that. And eventually the courts realize that, like, look, you can't do this. You can't. Equal protection under law, 14th Amendment of the Constitution. You cannot segregate. There is no more separate but equal. Plessy versus Ferguson doesn't exist. The Montgomery bus boycott or bus line cannot force people like Rosa Parks to ride in the back. And so we integrate the bus line. AP, for your test, the government ended the racist laws. Yay, government. The reality, the government created the racist laws. The government, state governments, created Jim Crow laws. It was the protesters. It was the men and women boycotting for 400 days that ended it. The government's not the hero here. The government waited day after day after day. The government threw him in jail for carpooling. The government fined him $500 and was going to make Martin Luther King Jr. spend The government was going to make Martin Luther King Jr. spend a year in jail for carpooling. The government's the hero? I don't think the government's the hero. Martin Luther King Jr., with the success of the Montgomery bus boycott, will create the SCLC, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. And he will use this organization to fight racism throughout the South, the old slave state. So he will now say, hey, I'm an organizer. I had this success. Let's keep doing this. And let's strike down racist law after racist law. I know what I'm doing. Side note, Ella Baker, we got to talk about all these civil rights leaders. As I mentioned in the last video with A. Philip Randolph, there's a lot of these leaders that don't get enough credit. We all love Martin Luther King Jr. He's great, and he deserves every second that we talk about it. Let's talk about some of these other people. Ella Baker, let's look at a quote from her. She was working on the SCLC. She organized SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. You didn't see me on television. You didn't see the news stories about me, the kind of role that I tried to play with to pick up pieces or put together pieces out of which I hope the organization might come. My theory is strong people don't need strong leaders. Now, that goes completely against what I was saying, but she is a strong leader, and we did need her, and you need the leaders. A lot of times today, our activism, our protests, our organizations fail because we do not have strong leaders keeping us together. And Ella Baker and Martin Luther King Jr. and A. Philip Randolph, when the times get hard, they persist, they continue to work, and they go through the sacrifices and they go through the struggle to get to equality. All right, let's talk about the sit-ins. So Walmart today, before there was Walmart, there was Woolworths. So here in Greensboro, North Carolina, there's a Woolworths. Imagine a Walmart where you go and buy your groceries, you go and buy your goods, but there's also a place to eat. Kind of like Walmart today. They have a McDonald's or a Subway in the Walmart. So it's a grocery store / restaurant. Now, in the restaurant area, 4 men from North Carolina A&T University, just down the street from me, go into the Woolworths and they sit at the counter where they're not allowed to sit. And they just sit. They don't do anything mean. They don't do anything violent. They just sit and wait for a meal. This is a non-violent protest. This is civil disobedience. So the law says they can't sit there. They are fighting against an unfair law. Now remember, they're not fighting, but they are expressing their disinterest. Or not disinterest. They're expressing that they don't like it. I'm sorry, my brain's fried. So here it is. Here's the 4 students from NCA&T sitting in and protesting at the Woolworths counter in Greensboro, trying to change the law. And they go sit every day, and they're abused and mistreated. And these sit-ins spread throughout the South, and everyone's going to different places, and black men and black women are sitting at counters where they're not allowed to by the law because they want to point out that this law is unfair, and they're going to break the law until the law changes. And you can see some of the horrific abuse that they were experiencing from racist Americans and the mistreatment, but they were showing the rest of America what was really happening. We were seeing, the country was looking in the mirror and saying, that's who we are. This is ugly. This is hateful. This is not who we should be. And the country realized, the country couldn't hide from it anymore. The country couldn't act like racism wasn't existing. The country couldn't act like the laws weren't racist. The country couldn't ignore Jim Crow laws. And eventually, as they started to lose money, right? People stopped shopping there. It caused too much of a problem. Eventually, the laws changed, separate but equal. Remember, that's not the law anymore. Segregation is not legal. We start to integrate. We get rid of these unfair laws. Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee will be created to help train students to protest non-violently. Protest and deal with the aggression. We'll have the freedom ride. So the law said segregation is illegal, so it shouldn't exist. Well, guess what? Just because the law says it doesn't mean that's the way that it is. There are a lot of laws on the books that are not enforced. So at this time, remember, Brown versus the Board of Education said separate but equal is no longer the law. You cannot segregate. So you need to integrate. Well, guess what? Most of these places in the South, they weren't listening. What did you say? I can't hear you. Oh, separate, but you said something about, I don't know. So the Freedom Riders say, look, we are going to challenge this law. The interstate bus lines, the Greyhounds, are supposed to be integrated. They should not be separated. Remember, Rosa Parks, back of the bus in Montgomery. Well, also the Greyhounds that go across the South, go from state to state, they were integrated. No. They were segregated. They can't be segregated. We can sit wherever we want. And so this is a challenge. And the bus will ride all throughout the South to challenge the policy of segregation. And all throughout, they will be abused and firebombed and horrific things will happen. But once again, it's on TV. These black Americans and white Americans protesting. They're not doing anything wrong. They're not screaming. They're not yelling. They're just riding a bus. They're peacefully wanting to be treated equally on a bus. Imagine that. You want to be treated equal on a bus, but they won't let you. They're trying to kill you. They're dragging you from a bus and beating you with a pipe, unlike live TV and you're an American and you're watching a black male or a white male drug from a bus and beat over the head with a pipe while the bus is burning in the background, and you're thinking to yourself, this is us, this is our country, what are we doing? The law says segregation is not supposed to exist. We've got to do something. It's one thing to just start passing laws. Now we got to go to the next step and make sure that the law is being enforced. We need to make sure the law is being followed, and we need to integrate society now. We need to end segregation now and forever.